Good morning. Good to see you here. Didn't know what kind of a turnout we get first thing in the morning. I'm Dirk Ellis. I'm with Tannis Aircraft, and obviously we're here today to talk about engine preheat. That's what we do. We've been doing it for about 45 years. If you're not familiar with Tannis, we're the first system to be certified by the FAA, the first ones to get PMA approval, and the first ones to get STC approval. We also have STC approval in Japan, Russia, Canada, and now EASA as well.
Don't you hate those airplanes?
Darn airplanes. That's what we're here for. But the most recent one we've gotten here was I got EASA approval on the 407 and the 429 here just last week. And of course we have our systems installed with Cirrus, Pilatus, as well as Bell, Augusta Westland, and Eurocopter, both here in Canada and in the US. So I guess we're talking about the why, when, what, and how to preheat. And some of the main goals, of course, we know. For me, it's increasing safety. I don't consider us being a preheat system or a company anymore. It's about safety. We see engine damage. Some of the things I've seen. I've been flying in the field. I've been with Tannis now for about 30 years. I was here for 10 years. I took a 10-year sabbatical and went flying commercially out west in the mountains. Wasn't the kind of flying in the airlines, but I was flying for senators, governors, flew Tom Dashiell around and did a lot of Forest Service work with fires and things like that. And flew all year round, so I saw a lot of engine damage. One of the things I saw was people damaging engines with cold starts. Spin a bearing on a main on a new engine and not realize they did that damage on a cold start. It doesn't show up for 20-25 hours, and here it is spring or summer and they're flying and they don't know what to relate that damage to. But of course, ease of starting, eliminating ice bridging on the spark plugs, kind of an odd thing, but it does happen quite often. And with a preheat system that's heating the cylinder heads, not just the bottom of the sump or something, we eliminate that. We have a reduction in engine wear and accessory wear. And then of course, if the battery is heated, and we sell lots of battery systems, all the turbine aircraft we have now, just about every one of them has a battery system on it. What it does is it increases the battery output, allows it to give full amperage output for starts. Batteries aren't frozen, so they charge all the way. And then we have extended battery life. We've got a number of people that operate in Alaska, and they say their batteries, it doubles the life of them just putting preheat on them. And some of the things we don't think about with damage, rocker covers, I've seen engines, we do a lot of testing, and you'll see some of the graphs that we've got in here and some of the other imagery that we've done with thermal imaging. But up to 15 minutes on a cold soaked engine before you have oil flow at the top of the rockers through the push rods. So you get a lot of damage that you don't see. You think that's just normal wear. If it gets overhauled, spin a bushing. And of course, cylinder scoring with wrist pin contact. We've kind of eliminated that over time. They've got better wrist pin manufacturing. And then I have seen skirts get galling on the cylinders from the shrinkage. Of course, proper engine oil flow, and then we heat all the critical driveline components. We use that primarily when we talk about helicopters. We heat everything in the helicopter for the main rotor gearbox, the engines, oil tanks, hydraulic reservoirs to the tail rotor. And a reduction of warm-up time saves a lot of fuel. One of the examples I like to give on a radial engine, on the 1340s that Kenmore Air uses out with their seaplanes, they went from a 35-minute warm-up time to 5 minutes. So there's quite a bit of fuel savings, wear and tear, and everything else, because that idle time counts against TBO. And of course, engine manufacturers mandate engine preheat. If you look at the service information letters that TCM put out, Tannis actually helped them write that original service bulletin, which is kind of neat. And then Lycoming as well. And they give warnings of the damage that it causes and the proper types of preheat to use. Continental goes right down to saying that they want to see elements in the thermocouple well, because our first systems, of course, were located in the thermocouple well. Now we have elements that screw right in and replace one of the rocker cover fasteners, or you can put it into an intake tube location. And these, of course, these are available to you online. You can look them up through the FAA site. Even Lycoming talks about it. Continental goes a little further. They say a cold-soaked engine is an engine that has been subjected to a wind chill of 20 degrees for 2 or more hours. So it could be 40 degrees out. As long as it has a wind chill, they're saying that that's a cold-soaked engine. So what to heat? To preheat, of course, is a complete engine. All critical driveline components, gearboxes, accessory cases, things like that. The battery and also the avionics. Tannis has had avionics heaters for a number of years, and we just finally redesigned a heater that we've released, and we're doing more certification with that. It's included in all our STC systems with the turbines. We're doing an STC right now for Kodiak for a Canadian customer, and that's going through completion right now, and that kit will be STC'd with that cabin heater in it. What that cabin heater does is that anything that's a glass panel, it doesn't light up below freezing. So you're essentially starting an engine without any kind of oil indication. Last time I was up in Canada, I didn't realize I was flying to Saratoga with a G1000. I parked it, thought I was only going to be there for a few hours. The wind kicked up and I left it parked outside, and of course I was in there for 5 hours. I came out and I had to fire that engine up, not having a preheat on it, but more importantly in this particular situation, because I had a cover on the engine, I fired it up. I still didn't have oil indication because of the fact that the panels weren't heated up. So this avionics cabin heater that we have, we're giving one away this weekend. All you got to do is fill out a little form, give us some information, and we're going to have a drawing. Imagine a couple hundred people, you have pretty good odds of winning that heater. So how to preheat? The way we do it is we heat the cylinder heads. This is a 4-cylinder example. It was done by Watertown. This wasn't us. This was done a number of years ago with a competitor's preheat system, a band system that was external, and you can see the difference in the heat rise. We use an element that's only 50 watts that screws into the cylinder head, and this is an example of a 60-watt element that's on the surface of the base of the cylinders. Now, we did this testing, probably 3 or 4 years before they came along with this, and I did it on my Bonanza. 60-degree morning, spring, I got to 3,500 feet, and we had a monitoring system on the aircraft, and I said, Pete, we're turning around, we're going to land. I'm not going to continue to fly here because the base temperatures of the cylinders had exceeded the TC data sheet recommended or required maximum temperature. So we never went down that path for a number of reasons. The other reason that we like to do is, of course, we like to heat the cylinder heads, and we'll get into some information on that as we move on here too. Other things to consider, depending upon how cold it is, and I've got some graphs that will show the difference that we get an additional about 40-degree rise over the engine temperature when you use an engine cover because you're containing that heat. So if it's very, very cold, we have operators in Canada that are certified to operate with their commuter airlines down to -54 with our systems. Pilatus cannot be registered in Canada without a Tannis system on it. So the PC-12 has to have our system on it here in North America. Our systems, because of the way we design them, we use a minimum wattage. To get maximum performance, you can use a simple 1,000-watt generator for a 4 or 6-cylinder system and just run it for 3-4 hours to heat up your engine. And then other things to consider are wing covers and things like that. Now this is a graph that we did, and we're continually doing testing. Just on a 177, and it happened to have a little 360 in it. What we're trying to do here is we got an ambient temperature, and we have a sump temperature. Then we have the cylinder temperatures here. And what this is a good example of, we shoot for a rise of about 60 degrees over ambient. We don't use thermostats or any kind of controllers on our system. It's designed for the mass of the engine. We want the excess energy just to bleed off. If we put thermostats on, we get cycling and we get a chance of the engine going through dew point. And when you go through dew point, there's a chance of moisture collecting. So once it's above dew point, you don't have a moisture issue. And that's the other thing with heating the cylinder heads above the oil temperature. Nowadays, we just want the oil to flow. You got multi-viscosity oils, you don't need the oil to get really warm. You just want to get a temperature rise of about 40 above ambient for the oil. And then the cylinder heads, you want them to be hotter. We don't want to have a chance of a bunch of heat in the bottom of the engine and then cold cylinder heads, because somewhere between that heat in the center of the engine and the outside of the engine, that metal is going to go through dew point, and you're going to get a chance of moisture buildup and, of course, a chance of corrosion. Some more graphing here that we did. This happens to be in a different aircraft. We had some extra probes put on it, but you can see if we look at the case are the blue ones here, and then here's the oil. So the most important ones to me are to look at the oil. So we want the oil at a lower temperature than the rest of the items. We don't want to release the moisture in the oil on the ground. We want you to release that moisture when you're flying the aircraft. Get the engine above 180, 200 degrees, your oil temperature for an hour or more is what they recommend from the engine manufacturers. Moisture does get in your oil as part of the combustion process. It blows by your rings, it gets entrained in the oil as it runs, so it is there. The preheat systems don't create the moisture, but they can release moisture that's entrained in the oil. You can't see it. Sometimes you'll see on engines where you pull the dipstick, it looks like a milkshake. That's real obvious that you did not get the engine warm enough to get that moisture out of the engine. So we want you to release it in the air while you're flying, not on the ground with a preheat system. Preheating that you select, if you have a different preheat system on, call us. I'll talk to you. I've been around doing this long enough. I can tell you how to operate that system. I'm not saying to pull it off. You know, if you have a sump-only system, run it for an hour, no more than 2 hours. You know, don't leave it on, because there's a myriad of problems that can happen with just a sump-only. We get associated with a lot of preheat systems. In fact, just about everybody's, I've been told, as a TANUS at one time or another. Everybody's riding on our wake because we've been doing this for so long. We are the first electric preheat system mounted on an engine. So consequently, we get associated with the good and the bad. So what we're looking for, and I'm pushing the wrong buttons here, is we want to produce a cylinder head temperature of at least 50 degrees over ambient. We want to produce a crankcase and nose temperature and sump temperature of about 40 over ambient. And we definitely don't want the oil to get above 110 degrees. Now the reason we're giving you 110 degrees, for example, if it's a 70-degree day and you've got that 60-degree rise, you're going to get pretty darn warm. So you don't necessarily need to have the system plugged in. Now our turbine systems, helicopters, EMS helicopters, just about every EMS helicopter in the United States and Canada has our system on it. They use those systems upwards to 70 degrees all the time for standby status. That way they can launch in 2 minutes. What we like to say with our helicopter systems is from off to liftoff in 2 minutes. Basically, once that machine is gyroed up, it's ready to launch. In the old days, it was 30 minutes to an hour before they could launch. This is the fun part here when we get into the idea of people thinking that our preheat systems create moisture. If you look at dew point, and I've got a good graph here coming up, what we're trying to do is get the delta between the air temperature, the dew point. We want to see a large spread between those two items. And I'll show you a graph here in a minute. Probably the easiest way to think of it is water evaporates at any temperature. It even sublimates when it's frozen. You know, it disappears. So the rate of evaporation is the delta between the temperature of the water and the ambient dew point. So the greater the delta, the faster the rate of evaporation. So the neatest thing and the easiest way for us here in cold weather to think about is think of a wet washcloth being left out in your house. It evaporates at room temperature. And in the winter, the cloth evaporates even faster just simply because of the delta between the dew point and the ambient air temperature. What we have here is a graph we did with reading the dew point and humidity, and that's what this bottom line is here. And this is the ambient temperature. We plug the system in, so we have a large dew point, or a large delta between the engine temperature and the dew point, and then we unplugged it. Now we just left it on here just so you could see what we did. So you can see here we have a narrow delta, and here we have a wide delta. So we don't have that, we have a spread between the dew point. Our complete systems keep the cylinder heads and all other parts of your engine above the oil line. So we're talking above the oil line, nominal oil level, above the dew point, so the moisture evaporates, and if it does, it will not condense on the metal inside of your engine. So once you've got that engine warm, leave it warm. What I like to say is, as soon as practical on a cold day, just plug your engine in. Plug in the preheat system after you get it in the hangar. Throw a blanket, moving blanket, sleeping bag, or if you have an engine cover, put it over the top. That way the engine, the entire environment inside of the cowl gets to the same temperature and it levels out. And everything underneath the engine cowl, even if you have a battery mount on the firewall, then gets warm. We've designed our system in a way to heat the engine completely, so you can leave it plugged in all the time. There's a lot of misnomers out there that you can't. Our system is designed to be done this way. That's one of the reasons we've gone ahead and done the STC. Our system's not required to have STC, but we do that so we can sell in other countries, and it also tells you that we've done the engineering properly, and now we have completely airworthy system. Every component, right down to the connector and the wires. The wires that we use in there are 260 degree. It's Teflon. It's cage coated, mil spec for us. It used to be proprietary to Boeing, and just recently they released that, so it's got an abrasion rating and everything. The connectors are certified at 200 degrees centigrade. And I could probably go on for quite a while boring you with that part, but I'll skip that. There's another temperature graph that we did on a 172, and here we've got some information. This is the ambient. Our cabin heater is here, so it's kind of mixed up in this. And then these are your case and sump readings right here. So your oil temperature and the bottom of your sump and the cylinders. Again, we have that spread, and that's what we're looking for. It's critical enough to where this graph is kind of interesting. This was done in a hangar, and it heated up, and somebody opened the hangar door, so you see the dip at the temperature here, and then the slow rise again, and the hangar door was never closed. One of the ways you can check the health of your system, we have simple meters now. Our systems don't use a lot of wattage. It's not 800 or 1,000 watts on a 6-cylinder, it's 465 watts. And our 4 cylinders are only 240 watts. And they're designed that way specifically. So some of the facts about Tannis aircraft is, does engine preheating cause moisture that results in corrosion? So those are some of the things. If you guys have questions, feel free to interject in here anytime too. How long does it take to preheat? Our systems are designed to reach a maximum saturation in 6 hours. After 6 hours, that energy just bleeds off. Unless, of course, you put an engine cover on it, then you're going to get another rise of about 40 degrees, depending upon the insulation of the cover. And an engine cover doesn't have to have a lot of insulation. Just needs a little bit. Doesn't have to be like a big, thick, fluffy sleeping bag. Just needs enough insulation to break that wind so that it's not sucking the cold air through that bare aluminum or composite cowl. Somebody have a question? I thought I heard somebody there. How much electricity? How much does it use to cost? Depends on what your charge is per kilowatt hour. But at 12 cents an hour, which most people get charged around here, if you're even charged in your hangar, it's roughly $1 something a day for a 6-cylinder and just under $1 for a 4-cylinder. You use a portable engine generator? Yes. And that's one of the reasons our systems have lower wattage. We even had a system we designed years ago with 100-watt cylinder elements so that you could heat it up fast with a generator. But now generators are lighter, smaller, more efficient. People can run them all night long or run them for 4 or 5 hours. Especially if you're in a cold area and you've got an engine cover, it's going to raise the temperature.
On an old 320 engine,
I couldn't hear that. What?
On an 0320 engine, your system, is that like a 275 watt system? Is that what?
Okay, the question is on our 4-cylinder systems?
Yeah.
The STC systems we sell now are 240 watts.
Okay.
Your older systems, we had a 50 watt element on the sump, so they were 250 watts. We do have some other systems people have purchased for a special application that might have a little more wattage, but generally it's 250 watts. And if you go online, everything we've got is available online. All our installation instructions for whether it's a Bell 429 or it's a little 4-cylinder Continental, they're available online. Probably the best thing you can look at is the ICA for the 4-cylinders or for the piston engines. There is Ohm's law inside of there, and there's a systems check. So you can record that information. It'll tell you how to read it with an ohm meter, so you can do a check on it and record that information in there, and then also print out the operating guide. It'll tell you how to operate the system. On the front page you can put the wattage, and the reason we do that is because if you sell this thing to somebody, your aircraft, and somebody says, do I need a generator, or you forget in a couple of years, what's the generator output I need? What does my system draw? What extension cord do I need? All that information is right on the front of the operating guide.
The reason I asked, we do ice fishing in Oregon, stay out of Lake West, and I have people who went, and we can run 2-liter cannons heaters on the house.
Yep.
And it works fabulous.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Yep. Yeah, you need a, say, a 1,000 watt generator. It can put out continuous about 75% of its maximum output. So 750 watts roughly. Can you leave a Tannis plugged in all the time? We just went over that, and yes, it's designed to be left on all the time. The way we use our systems on the aircraft we fly, and tens of thousands of our customers, when it gets cold, they start plugging the system in. As soon as practical after they land, they just plug it in. I mean, if you're worried about a couple bucks a day, depending upon what you're flying, it's only really for 3-4 months out of the year that you're going to be doing that. Some people might run it for, you know, if you're in Canada, 6 months out of the year. Should I use a timer or a thermostat on your system? No. We do not want that thing cycling by any stretch of the imagination. Get it above dew point, leave it above dew point. Probably the best story I've got is I had a guy call me a couple years ago and he said, I had to tear my engine down. I said, oh great. Another one of these guys that thinks he's got a Tannis on and he's got corrosion. He says, no, this isn't a bad story. I got a Comanche with a 540 in it, and I'm in the military. And I got stationed over in Europe, and I didn't come back for 3 years. Before I left, I'd had my aircraft plugged in with the heater going. And at the time we had a VBR, which just circulated air through the crankcase. He left it on for 3 years. And the reason he called, he wanted to let me know, his mechanic called and said, how did you preserve this engine? It's in perfect condition. You just shut it off in the hangar, you didn't put any special oil, you didn't do any preservation at all, and here we've got an engine that has absolutely no corrosion, all the gaskets are so flexible and everything. Only reason it had to be torn down, it had a crankshaft AD. But don't use a timer, don't cycle it. Don't use a thermostat, most importantly. Most thermostats have quite a variance. It could be if you want it to come on at, say, 40 degrees, it's really coming on at 45, or at 25 and turning off, or 35 and turning off at 45. So it's going to be dipping, and we don't want to see that happen. If you want to use some kind of a cell switch or something, that's fine. Not everybody flies enough to take advantage of it. Here in the winter, if the engine's frozen, obviously if there is moisture that got into the engine somehow from flying it, it is not going to rust because it's frozen. But again, the way I recommend it, just get rid of the gimmicks, make it simple, and just plug it in and use the system.
I got a question. I don't fly a lot in the winter. Sometimes it goes a lot of weeks.
Yep.
When I get to the flat, burn the hanger, put a cover on it, plug the Tannis in. But I got one of these deals I can call off my cell phone. I'm going to fly today and I turn it on for 6 hours or so. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we just don't want you to turn it on. I'm going to fly today, turn it off. I'll fly tomorrow and do that. But yeah.
One time I was going on, but I haven't plugged it all the time.
Yep. No, that's.
But it's okay if I can park it, plug it in, and just leave it on for a week or so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And that's actually the best way. If anybody ever has a question, I mean, even in the summertime, when you go to check your oil, you see water dripping on the filler or on the dipstick. If you're worried about it, like a Lycoming and the Continentals that have the filler on the oil dipstick on the filler, just loosen it up and caulk it off to the side, throw a rag over it or something like that. You're going to pre-flight it and you're going to tighten it up anyway. But that'll let anything expel. Yeah, and that's usually what I tell people to do if they're worried about it. So we talked about how long it takes to heat, 6 hours. The Continental Service information letter they sent out, they said they don't want to see a system plugged in more than 24 hours prior to departure. That's because they're covering every preheat system that's made out there. Then they cover their backside. Continental's now working with us, not only with their diesel engines, but with installation at the factory at not just Cirrus, because they're owned by the same people now, but at all the other manufacturers. So they want to start recommending our kit, and we're hoping to see that come to fruition here pretty soon. If you only want to heat the sump, go ahead. It's not going to be our system, but just don't leave it on for very long. I'd recommend less than 2 hours. So far as using an insulated engine cover, I recommend covering an engine cowl in a hanger. I don't care if you're using a moving blanket, a sleeping bag, just don't scratch it up with the zippers. If you've got an insulated cover, that's great. That works real nice because then when you go out and you fly someplace, if you don't have power, I used to fly freight out in Montana. I end up, who knows, in Idaho or something, and I have to sit on the ramp for 3, 4, 6 hours. We just had engine covers, and it kept the engine warm enough above 20 degrees so it would still start. So insulated engine covers are nice to have around. And of course our systems can be put on LSAs, and you do need a letter of authorization from the airframe manufacturer. Now if you're the airframe manufacturer on experimental, of course you can issue your own letter and put it on. The reality is a preheat system is a hang-on. It doesn't actually need to be certified because it's not used in flight. But is that really what you want? You want a certified system. You want somebody to look at your work anyway. I know that even when I'm doing installations, I have somebody go around and I look at everything that I've done, right down to buttoning up the cowl. Is an STC required? No, an STC is not required. But if our system's installed, it can be installed as a minor alteration. But any portion of that system should include a major alteration that has to get a field approval or it has to be part of an STC. So if you put a door in a cowl or something like that, or a flush plug, that should have field approval associated with it. If you penetrate a firewall to get inside by putting a fitting on, not just chasing the wire through with existing battery cables, something like that, to heat the battery or to heat the avionics with one of our avionics heaters, then you're going to need to get some kind of field approval for that, if it's not included in the STC. So we continually, yes? Did I miss one? I haven't done this in a long time. Usually Doug does this. Which one? Our systems are designed, even the helicopter systems, to get the rise of the item being heated to about 60 degrees over ambient. So I shoot for, when I'm doing my engineering, between 50 and 70 above ambient. I'll give you some examples. We did some work on the Q400, and then we did the Q300. They had Bombardier sold some to Russia. But the requirement was, before they purchased the aircraft, 4 of them, they had to have TANA systems on them. So we sent our systems we designed, and on this particular aircraft, it was with the Pratt & Whitney 150s, which is a pretty good size engine, and the batteries they wanted heated. So we sent our system over. They were installed in Bermuda, of all places, and then flown up to Siberia, and they did the testing. Our systems heated the stuff up at minus 44 within 1 degree centigrade of what our design parameters were. So we do a pretty good job with that. And they had to have 3 batteries heated on that. So they got an emergency backup, they've got an avionics battery, and then a primary battery for start. So to answer your question, we're looking for about a 60 degree rise above ambient. The additional heat just bleeds off. You know, of course, unless you're sitting in the wind or something like that. We're continually doing testing. We just purchased a new imaging camera for thermal imaging, which is a high resolution, and we're doing a little more testing with that. This is one of our older cameras. Right here, Bulldog gave us an engine and a pair of engines to work with, and we're doing some testing on it. It has to be a 520 out of a Baron that the guy had overhauled, and this is on the floor. It doesn't go in the Luscombe in the background. I'm sure the guy would love to have that in there, but and you can see what we're heating with the cylinder heads. This is just looking head on this engine with the thermal imaging camera, so you can really see where the heat is. We can't see the underside because it's shadowed, so it's not reading, but there's the top element on the top of the case. It's located right here. And then, of course, the cylinder heads. So we want to know what our systems are doing. Some of the things we've changed our system with here, we've done some improvements. When I came back to the company 8 years ago, I came back, but I said, we've got to change the wiring and we've got to change the connectors. And so we spent a couple of years researching and finding better wiring for that, better cabling, and of course sealed connectors to get rid of the old spade connectors that we had. When we started this, engines didn't have wiring except for maybe ground leads for mags, ignition leads, and maybe something going out for an oil temperature sending unit. That was about it. Now we have a myriad of wires running in the engine compartment. So it's been an evolutionary process, and the requirements are much higher than, say, for an automobile. So a lot of these components aren't available, readily available. They have to be specially made. So that's one of the things that our system has evolved to do, is to compensate for that. And it's allowed us to reach into and become part of the commercial market. So we're not installed just on GA aircraft here in the US, where we started with small piston. We're installed on all the Canadian government's aircraft except for a few of their jets, from 172s that they fly to the BO-105s, and now the 412s that are going on the icebreakers. So one of the things we did here recently was I did a complete metallurgy. How can I say that here? Went through the metallurgy of the bolt that we had, and I found a better way to make it. And we came up with a CNC process for making all of our threaded elements now that replace the thermocouple CHT element that we had, and also the intake tube bolt. It's a better material. It's increased the strength of it by twice. So it's twice as strong as it used to be. It's a stainless steel 17-4 material. It's a fastener, aerospace fastener material. Costs us a lot more to make, but it's a lot better part. And of course, I talked about the wiring and the connectors that we've done too. We now have one kit that fits all 4-cylinder air-cooled engines. And we also have only one kit that fits the 6-cylinders as well. It leaves all the CHT wells open. It's STC. It can be sold in Canada and EASA installed around the world now. EASA approval, of course, is a European approval. And then we have one kit that fits the Rotax, whether it's a 412 or, I'm sorry, is it 212 and 214? And now, of course, we have STC approval from the FAA, Canada, Russia, Japan, and EASA is our latest one. We have some accessories you can purchase. We have sealed circular plug brackets for the Lycoming, is real common. And then we also have 3 or 4 different doors that are structurally sound that you can put in with field approvals if they're not already included in the STCs. All our connectors are sealed now. We have special crimp tools that are inexpensive you can buy from us to work with our wiring. If you've got a more complex system where you need to make modifications, or a splice, even in an older system. We do have the slotted socket that we sell, and I really promote the use of for installing our cylinder elements in intake tube location, so you can use a 1/4-inch ratchet and properly torque it to what the factory specifications are. We have specific kits for turbine and radial engines, helicopters, and then of course we have cabin avionics heat as well. And that's all I got. Yes, sir. If you go by our booth in here, the way I recommend installing is like a TSO radio or something. Go to 4313 2B, not 1B, and just look at the first chapter, and it kind of goes through that. It gives you examples of how to install radios in existing panels, or structural components in the aircraft. And the same certification process applies for that as well. We have a pretty good instruction, walk you through that. With that, any more questions? Good to go, thank you.